What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about the differences between British versus American comedy, according to none other than British comedy legend Stephen Fry. I thought this looked like such an interesting video. This is like an old interview featuring Stephen Fry, where he talks about what he thinks separates American and British comedy, what defines them, what the differences really are. And I thought that sounded so fascinating. So let's take a look.
We have time for one more question, which will come from the gentleman there.
You talk about the sense of humour, the American sense of humour, and we haven't really you haven't mentioned so much the British sense of humour, but do you think they differ hugely? And if so, what accounts for that difference?
Oh, wow. So he was talking about the American sense of humor. What is the American sense of humor? I feel like, what defines an American comedy? Because here in America, there's a phrase we use that everyone uses, British comedy, British humor. But we never talk about American humor. That's not even a term we use here in America, honestly. I feel like we're not known for humor in the same way Britain is. So it's interesting that they were even talking about American comedy. I don't know. I feel like American comedy is just very silly, kind of surface level silly, and British comedy seems to be a bit more deep or introspective or self-deprecating. Just a lot more levels to it, honestly. But let's hear what Stephen Fry has to say.
It's a really good point. I think, it strikes at the heart of what is American optimism is a really important thing. But not only optimism, but a refusal to see oneself in a bad light or, one could talk about this for far too long, but...
Oh my God. He is so insightful already. American optimism. I never thought about it like that. Or the Americans' unwillingness to talk negatively about ourselves. Yeah, British humor is very self-deprecating and very like making fun of yourself, and a lot of humor in looking inward on yourself and society, whereas Americans don't tend to want to do that. I think we're a bit too proud, a bit too much pride, that we don't want to necessarily make fun of ourselves in the same way. That's a really great observation.
But if you go to an American bookshop, by far the biggest section is self-help and improvement.
Huh.
The idea that life is refinable and improvable, and that you can learn a technique for anything, whether it's lovemaking, being a businessman, a marriage, cooking, losing weight, whatever it is, there's a...
Wow, right. So that's what he means by American optimism. We Americans tend to maybe have more of an attitude of things will get better. I can make things better. Everything's gonna be great. Not a default of let me worry about what could go wrong. That's not our default. Our default is more, I'm optimistic about the future, which I think can be a really positive attribute. But I know British culture can sometimes focus more on what's negative, and it comes across in the humor, making fun of what's negative, and a lot of negative types of comedy, or using that to be comedic. Wow, this is great stuff. Oh my gosh.
There's an NLP way of doing it. There's an Anthony Robbins way of doing it. There's a things they didn't teach you at Harvard way of doing it. There's an unbelievable sense that life is improvable, that you can be lectured at, or indeed given a sermon at. That's...
It's also so interesting just hearing him talk about America in this way. Because I think living here in the United States, I don't even realize that that's an attribute we have until Stephen Fry points it out. And then I'm like, yes, that's absolutely true.
It's the Protestant base of America that things are done by text and by works, as opposed to by submission and by, a doctrine in the way that the higher church, European rump, we still believe. And there is a sense of original sin in Europe. I mean, this is a bizarre theory that I won't push to its limit, but when it...
Oh man, this goes very deep, indeed. So he's just talking about, like, Europe having a different attitude towards life in general. It's very interesting how this is a discussion on comedy, but comedy really does reflect the attitudes of society and culture. And I think that's what he's really getting at here.
When it comes to comedy, it's satisfactorily, I think, obvious that the American comic hero is a wisecracker who is above his material and who is above the idiots around him. And the British comic,
Right.
put it this way, the American comic hero, like John Belushi or someone like that, you know that scene in...
He's absolutely right. Like, for the most part, there's some movies like Dumb and Dumber with Jim Carrey that I think of that are just, the whole point is that the person is stupid and we're making fun of them in a way. And maybe this has to do with American humor as well. There are a lot of comedies featuring like people being funny because we think they're stupid or dumb, but we think they're beneath us. That's not me. That's some other American idiot. Ha 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 ha. And you enjoy the comedy. Whereas maybe in Britain, a lot of the comedy is more about self-reflection and laughing at yourself, saying, oh, ha ha ha, that's me. That's my neighbor. That's him or her. And that is a major difference. Right? This is amazing stuff. Oh, it's really, I didn't know this was going to be so philosophical.
Animal House, where there's a fellow playing folk music on a guitar, and John Belushi picks up the guitar and destroys it. And the cinema laughed because he just smashes it and then waggles his eyebrows at the camera. Everyone says, God, he's so great. Well, a British comedian would want to play the folk singer. We want to play the failure. All the great British comic heroes
Oh, that's fantastic. Wow. The American comedian wants to be the person breaking the guitar and ha ha ha, how funny, I'm doing this crazy over the top thing. Where the British comedian wants to be the person in that scenario who's having the horrible thing done to them, rather than doing the horrible thing. I don't know what that says about American society and British society. Well, it says a lot. I mean, this is really interesting.
All the great British comic heroes are people who want life to be better and on whom life craps from a terrible height, and who say...
Right. The British comedians are the butt of the joke, whereas the American comedian or American comedy is somehow like, oh, you're the one up high making jokes about other people. Wow. It's amazing how, like, Stephen Fry is just coming up with this right off the top of his head. This is amazing.
Sense of dignity is constantly compromised by the world letting them down. They want to wear a tie. They're not quite smart enough to wear an old school tie because they're kind of lower middle class. They are Arthur Lowe in Dad's Army. They are Anthony Aloysius Hancock. They are Basil Fawlty.
They're more relatable. They're relatable to the common person. But I think in America, we don't want to relate to the comedian that's the butt of the joke, that's down on his luck, and is like society is like raining down upon him. We don't want to relate to that. We don't find that funny. But in Britain, that is the comedy. The comedy is sometimes like the depression of how life can be like bad in some circumstances. Wow.
They are Del Boy. They are Blackadder. They're not quite the upper echelons, and they try to be decent and right. Everything tries to be proper. They're even David Brent from The Office. And their lack of dignity is embarrassing. They are a failure. They are an utter failure. They're brought up to expect empire and respect and decency and being able to wear a blazer in public, and everyone around them just goes... Whereas the American hero is the smart talking, he's Jim Carrey and he's Ben Stiller and whoever he just...
Yes. He's so right. There is a sense of American comedies where the comedian has dignity. They are smart in a way, or at least in control of their life and their circumstances, or gain control and gain the upper hand, which is opposite to sort of the British comedy scenario of being down on your luck and negative things happening. And it's a much more realistic take, but less optimistic. Which is, yeah, I mean, it's amazing. There are a lot of things that separate British and American comedy, and I think Stephen Fry has put it so amazingly eloquently here in this discussion.
Goes all the way back. They can wisecrack their way out of any situation.
Right.
They win the girl. They're smarter. They've got the biggest knob in the room.
Yeah.
The British guy arrives at the room and says, "Oh my God, I've left my knob behind. I haven't even got one." And in a sense, comedy is the microcosm that allows us to examine the entire difference between our two cultures.
Yes.
Ours is bathed in failure, but we make a glory of our failure. We celebrate it.
Yes.
We love the fact that every great British comic hero can go into a dictionary. He's a bit of a Basil Fawlty. He's a bit of a Captain.
Yes. Oh, I love it. And there is something I really respect that about British culture, that you are able to laugh at yourself and laugh at the misery in life. But I also enjoy the American humor that laughs at like the optimism in life, or it's just two totally different approaches to comedy, and like Stephen Fry said, to culture and life. How you view life, I suppose, is fascinating.
Tim Mannering, he's a bit of a steptoe, he's a bit of a baldrick, he's a bit of a blackadder, he's a bit of a this, they're characters that we recognize, all of them so flawed as to be an utter disaster. But you can't do that with American comedy. You can't say he's a bit of, who's that chap in Friends, or he's a bit of a, it doesn't really work.
Yeah, even in Friends. Yes, in American comedy, I could not fathom an American comedy that is really truthfully, like, showing stuff that's too real, showing stuff that's too true, showing stuff that's quote-unquote negative. I could never picture an American comedy doing that, because that's not how we do it.
They're not characters at all. They're just brilliant repositories of fantastic killer one-liners.
Wow. That's so insightful. So insightful. Amazing, honestly. Wow. So that was like that was an interview from, what, 11 years ago, it looks like? And man, this amazing insight still rings so true today. Man, Stephen Fry is pretty incredible with his ability to articulate not just his thoughts, but very insightful thoughts, like with pretty deep analysis of this question. The guy who asked this question at the beginning probably has his mind blown right now. I know I do. But I guess Stephen Fry is kind of known for that, isn't he? Amazing. And this was such a fun way that I hadn't really ever thought about or heard before of viewing American versus British comedy. And it's very simple. American comedy optimistic, and British comedy pessimistic. The American comedian is in control of his life. He can be the smartest guy. He comes up with the zingers, the one-liners, the jokes that can get him through any trouble or through whatever. And the British comic is the guy who is the butt of jokes. The jokes are happening to him. He's suffering through it. And it's a bit more relatable in that sense. And I think with the American humor, it kind of reflects Americans' desire to be that person. We don't want to see somebody that we don't want to be. We want to see a person that we want to be. Because even my Dumb and Dumber example at the beginning, when I think about it, in the end of the movie, like Jim Carrey's character still has like an optimistic, like a good ending, like a happy ending with his friend. It's not a pessimistic ending. So that's... I really, really enjoyed this. I didn't know what to expect, but I'm so pleasantly surprised at what a philosophical take Stephen Fry has put forth here, and a take and a view on American versus British culture, almost, an outlook on life, which is fascinating. Fascinating stuff. So I enjoyed this. Anyway, if you enjoyed this as well, feel free to give this video a like, or leave a comment, perhaps with your thoughts on American versus British comedy, and how they reflect our different societies and cultures. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to British culture and stuff about Britain I have never seen or learned before, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.